Let us begin by imagining a world that existed thousands of years ago, long before many civilizations we commonly learn about in history. Before the rise of Greece, before Rome, even before the Great Pyramids of Egypt had reached their full splendor, there existed a civilization that grew quietly along the banks of a great river. This was the Indus River, and along its fertile plains developed a society so well organized, so thoughtfully designed, and so advanced in its way of living, that its memory still inspires wonder today. This is what we call the Indus Valley Civilization. Today, its remains lie mostly in what is now Pakistan and parts of northwest India. The cities, Mohenjo-Daro, Harappa, Dhalavira, Lothal, are now silent. The streets are empty. The walls stand worn by time. But if you walk through them carefully, you can almost imagine how life once flowed here. The sun warms the reddish-brown bricks that make up the ancient homes and public structures. These bricks are not randomly shaped. Incredibly, they are almost all of uniform size, suggesting a standardized method of construction. This means the people who lived here had knowledge of planning, measurement, and consistency. Their cities were not the result of random growth. They were intentional, organized, and well thought out. If you were to stand at a high point and look down at the layout of Mohenjo-Daro, you would see something remarkable: straight streets forming a grid-like pattern. The city appears designed with clarity and care. There are main roads and smaller lanes branching out neatly from them. Such city planning is something we usually associate with modern urban development, and yet it existed here, more than 4,000 years ago. As you walk through the remains of these ancient streets, you will notice something else extraordinary. Each house, regardless of size, had access to water. You would find wells placed at various points throughout the city and drainage systems beneath the ground. These drains are covered, built with slopes that allow water to flow naturally. Even today, if you compare this design with many modern towns, the planning of the Indus Valley Civilization stands out as impressively advanced. This tells us something important about the people who lived here. They likely valued hygiene, cleanliness, and the comfort of daily living. They believed in maintaining a city where waste was removed efficiently and where water was available to everyone. This kind of focus shows a society that gave importance to public well-being. But perhaps the most fascinating part of this civilization is not just how they lived, but what we still do not know about them. Most ancient civilizations left behind written records, stories of their kings, their wars, their beliefs, their accomplishments. The Indus Valley people also left symbols carved on small seals, pottery, and other objects. These symbols appear to be part of a written script. However, despite many attempts, researchers have not yet been able to understand or translate the script. We can see the writing. We can count the signs. We can find patterns. But we cannot yet read their language. Because of this, much of their culture, their stories, their beliefs, and their daily experiences remain unknown to us. It is almost as if they are speaking to us from the past, but in a language we cannot yet hear. What we can observe from their artifacts, however, tells us a great deal. They made jewelry using precious stones. They created pottery with elegant shapes and smooth texture. They carved small figurines that may have carried religious or cultural meanings. They built storage facilities for grain, which suggests they understood agriculture and food management on a large scale. Their trade networks were far-reaching. We have found objects from the Indus Valley in Mesopotamia, a region located in modern Iraq, which means these people traveled or at least exchanged goods across great distances. Trade must have played an important role in their economy. And yet, in all the excavated remains, something is missing: clear evidence of kings, emperors, or powerful rulers. Most ancient civilizations displayed power with grand palaces, large statues, inscriptions declaring authority, or tombs prepared for their leaders. But in the Indus Valley, we do not find such structures. This absence leads historians to consider the possibility that their society may have been more egalitarian. This means power may not have been concentrated in the hands of one king or a ruling class. Instead, it might have been shared among groups, communities, or councils. Their civilization may have been built on cooperation rather than dominance. Among the most interesting structures found is a large pool-like construction in Mohenjo-Daro, known today as the Great Bath. This was not a simple bathing area. It was built carefully with waterproof techniques, surrounded by what appear to be changing rooms or chambers. Some researchers believe it may have been used for ritual cleansing or community ceremonies. Though we cannot say with certainty, it does suggest that water held a cultural or spiritual significance. Life in the Indus Valley seems to have been peaceful. Archaeologists have not found large numbers of weapons or signs of violent conflict. Their cities do not show evidence of being built for defense against war. This does not necessarily mean they never experienced conflict, but it does indicate that warfare did not play a central role in shaping their society. Their society seems to have operated with a level of balance. There is no strong evidence of enormous wealth difference. Houses vary in size, but not dramatically. We do not find extravagant homes beside tiny, cramped dwellings. This suggests that the people may have lived with relative social equality. They may have worked together not because one person commanded them, but because cooperation was necessary for the shared well-being of the community. The cities themselves were divided into areas, but not in the way we see in kingdoms or empires. There is often a higher mound in the city, sometimes called the citadel area by archaeologists, and a lower residential area. But even the citadel does not show signs of palaces or fortresses. Instead, it contains structures that appear to have public or communal importance. The Great Bath in Mohenjo-Daro is found in this upper section. Storage buildings for grain are also found there. These were likely places that served the community rather than displayed power. Trade played a significant part in their economy. The presence of certain materials tells us this. For example, beads found in Indus Valley sites are often made of carnelian, a reddish stone that requires careful heating and shaping. These beads have been found far beyond the Indus region, even in Mesopotamia. This means goods traveled either over land or by river and sea routes. It is possible that merchants journeyed for many days at a time, moving along rivers, across plains, through mountain passes, reaching distant cities where languages and customs differed, yet trade created connection. Life likely moved with the seasons. When the monsoon rains arrived, the fields would become lush and green. When the dry months came, communities relied on stored grain and water management systems. Their understanding of nature was practical. They built reservoirs and storage systems with care. They respected their environment not by conquering it, but by adapting to it thoughtfully. However, the stability of any civilization is closely tied to its environment. The same rivers that brought life could also bring challenge. Archaeological evidence suggests that flooding occurred more than once. In some layers of the city ruins, we see signs of rebuilding over earlier construction, which may have been damaged by water. Flooding would have affected crops, homes, and daily life. Repeated natural disruptions may have gradually placed stress on the community. Climate patterns may also have changed. If rainfall reduced over time, crops would fail more frequently. A shortage of food affects every level of society, no matter how advanced. People may have had to move to regions where water and farmland were more reliable. As we reach the final part of our journey through the Indus Valley Civilization, let us stand once more in the quiet of these ancient streets. The dust lies still. The wind moves softly. The walls, though worn, continue to hold the shape of a city that once lived with grace and intention. There is something remarkable in the stillness of these places. When we walk through Mohenjo-Daro or Harappa, we do not feel the presence of destruction. We do not see ruins of violence, nor traces of sudden disaster. Instead, we see the delicate remains of everyday life paused in time. As though the people simply stepped away, expecting to return. This is what gives their memory a unique character. It is gentle. It is calm. And yet, it is filled with questions. We know that the society was skilled, thoughtful, and organized. We know they built cities with precision. We know they valued cleanliness and access to water. We know they traded, crafted, farmed, and lived within communities that worked together. We know they left behind art, objects, tools, and a script that remains quiet but meaningful. And although we do not know their names, their personal stories, or their spoken words, we do know this: they were humans, like us. They woke with the sun, ate meals with family, worked through the day, rested in the evening. They watched the same moon, listened to the same rustle of wind, and lived their lives with hopes and concerns that we can only imagine. That connection reminds us that history is not distant. It is part of us. Archaeologists continue to study new sites. Each discovery adds something new. Sometimes a piece is small, a bead, a pot fragment, a tool. Yet each object helps complete the picture of the past. Each one brings us a little closer to understanding who these people were. One day, we may finally decipher their script. When that day comes, their voice will return. Their thoughts, recorded thousands of years ago, will rise again into our language, and the silence will gently lift. Until then, the ruins themselves are their message. They tell us that human beings, even in ancient times, were capable of remarkable thought, cooperation, and design. The achievements of the Indus Valley Civilization are not loud or forceful, but they are steady and intelligent. They show a way of life that valued balance, between home and community, between people and nature. And perhaps, this is the most meaningful part of their story. Today, our world is often loud, fast, and crowded with constant movement. We speak often of development and progress. Yet this ancient civilization shows us that progress is not only about size, wealth, or power. Progress can also be quiet. It can be thoughtful. It can exist in careful planning, shared responsibility, and the simple understanding of how to live well. Another factor may have been cultural change. Researchers have found signs that new groups eventually entered the region. These groups may not have conquered in a sudden or violent way. The change appears gradual. Cultures could have mixed, evolved, and transformed. The original identity of the Indus Valley Civilization may have slowly dissolved into new forms of life that continued, just under different customs and languages. In the end, the cities were not destroyed in a fire or abandoned all at once. They faded. People left quietly, perhaps over generations, carrying only what they could. The streets that were once clean and full of movement became empty. The bath's water dried. The pottery stopped being made. And the script, once understood by everyone, became silent. Yet, even in silence, the civilization did not disappear completely. Its memory survived in the ground, waiting to be discovered thousands of years later. And when it was, the world realized that human history is wider, deeper, and more varied than we once believed. The Indus Valley Civilization reminds us that greatness does not always shout. Sometimes, it lives quietly. Sometimes, it is careful, balanced, and thoughtful. And sometimes, it leaves behind questions that continue to inspire curiosity long after time has moved on. It is a story still unfolding, as each new discovery adds a small piece to the picture. And though we do not yet have the full image, what we do see is something remarkable: a civilization that lived with order, intelligence, and respect for the needs of daily life. Their silence invites us not to despair, but to explore further. When we look at a civilization through the ruins it leaves behind, we are often looking at the surface of something much deeper. Buildings, tools, ceramics, and objects help us understand how people lived, but beneath these physical remains lies the human experience, the hopes they carried, the challenges they faced, the stories they shared, and the meaning they found in their world. The Indus Valley Civilization, despite being ancient, offers this sense of closeness to everyday life. There is a gentleness in the way their homes were built. There is a quiet practicality in the way water and waste were managed. There is carefulness in the way streets and walls were arranged. It feels as though the people cared deeply about living in balance, with each other and with nature. Let us imagine the rhythm of their day more closely. In the cool early morning, the streets would begin to wake. Farmers would travel to the fields, carrying tools made from stone and copper. Women might prepare food at home, grinding grain into flour on smooth, flat stones. Water would be drawn from wells, the sound of the rope and clay bucket echoing softly in the courtyard. But the river that sustained life could also bring challenge. Excavations show layers in the soil that suggest floods came more than once. When a civilization builds close to water, the water becomes both friend and unpredictable force. Floods could damage homes, wash away stored crops, or force families to rebuild. And yet, despite these challenges, the civilization lasted for centuries. The decline of the Indus Valley was not sudden. It happened slowly, almost quietly, across time. The changes may not have been noticed immediately. A slightly weaker harvest one year. A shift in rainfall patterns. A river changing its course subtly, then more dramatically. Families may have begun to move to new areas where water was more reliable. Fields that once produced plenty may have produced less. The sound of trade along the river routes may have grown quieter. As new groups arrived in the region, bringing different languages and ways of life, the original traditions of the Indus Valley people began to blend with others. Over generations, the identity of the civilization gradually transformed. The old practices were not erased, they simply changed into new ones. This is why we say the civilization did not vanish suddenly, it transitioned. It became part of the long, continuous story of the Indian subcontinent. And yet, one part of their legacy remains uniquely mysterious, their script. The symbols they carved with such care remain unreadable. Many attempts have been made to understand the language. Scholars have tried connecting it to known language families. Computers have analyzed patterns. Yet, the meaning remains just out of reach. It is as though the people left behind a message that time has not yet unlocked. When we look at the script, we are reminded that history is not always complete. There are still chapters waiting to be understood. The Indus Valley script is not just writing, it is the voice of a civilization. And we still wait to hear it clearly. Today, when we walk through the archaeological sites, we do so slowly, with respect. The bricks may be old, but they are strong. The layout may be silent, but it still speaks. The wells, the drains, the courtyards, they quietly tell us that the people who lived here valued order, cleanliness, and a peaceful rhythm of life. The Indus Valley Civilization gives us a kind of lesson without speaking it directly. It shows us that a society can be advanced without being loud. That progress can be practical rather than dramatic. That harmony can exist without grand displays of power. It teaches us that human history contains not only the stories of kings and battles, but also the stories of ordinary people who built stable, thoughtful communities and lived lives full of purpose. And it reminds us that even when a civilization fades, its memory can continue to inspire those who come afterward. The homes in these cities were made of baked bricks, arranged carefully. Some houses had multiple rooms, and some even had 2 stories. Steps would lead from the street into the home, and inside there would be an open courtyard where family activities took place. It is easy to imagine children playing in that courtyard, adults grinding grain, sewing fabric, or shaping clay. The courtyard was likely the heart of the household, a place where life moved gently, steadily. In one corner of the house, you would find a bathroom. A drain carried water out and into the city's underground drainage system. The more we look at these structures, the more we realize that these people understood sanitation in ways many societies would not rediscover for thousands of years. Their concern for cleanliness was not accidental, it was built into the very design of their cities. We might picture people walking through the marketplace. There would be stalls lined along certain streets, with merchants offering pottery, beads, grains, and woven goods. The sound would be calm, not chaotic. Trade here seems to have been organized. Weighted stones were used to measure goods. These standardized weights are found across many Indus cities, indicating a shared system and shared values across the region. This shows cooperation not only within each city, but across the entire civilization. Their craftsmanship is especially notable in the small objects they created. Stone seals, for example, are among the most iconic artifacts of the Indus Valley. These seals are usually square, carved with images of animals, bulls, elephants, rhinoceroses, and symbols that form their undeciphered script. The images are detailed and careful, suggesting artistic skill and meaning. These seals may have been used for trade, identity, or perhaps religious or cultural purposes. Among the seals, one image appears repeatedly, a seated figure surrounded by animals. Some researchers have suggested that this figure could represent a spiritual or divine symbol, possibly related to later cultural traditions of the region. But we cannot say for certain. The meaning remains quietly hidden behind the silence of the forgotten script. People here also created small figurines. Some are of animals, while others represent human figures. One of the most well-known is a small bronze sculpture often called the Dancing Girl. She stands with one hand on her hip, chin raised, posture confident. The sculpture is simple in size but striking in expression. It suggests grace, confidence, and perhaps joy. It invites us to imagine cultural practices, music, movement, dance, perhaps part of celebrations or daily life. Through this small statue, we catch a glimpse of personality, individuality, and human presence beyond the bricks and structures. However, even the most stable civilizations face challenges. The Indus Valley Civilization did not come to a sudden, dramatic end. Instead, it appears to have declined gradually. Scholars have proposed several possibilities to explain this decline. One theory suggests that the rivers changed their course. If the Indus River or its tributaries shifted away from key regions, the source of water would have diminished. Without reliable water, agriculture would weaken, forcing people to leave in search of resources. Another possibility is climate change. Evidence suggests that rainfall patterns may have changed over time, leading to droughts. When crops fail repeatedly, societies struggle to sustain themselves. There is also the theory of migration. Groups from other regions, such as Central Asia, may have entered the area. Instead of a sudden invasion, the cultural blending that followed could have slowly changed the identity of the civilization. The truth may be a combination of these factors. Because we cannot read their script, we do not yet have their own explanation. What we know comes only from observing what remains. Today, when we walk through the quiet ruins of these ancient cities, we are witnessing the physical memory of a people who once lived with organization, dignity, and remarkable skill. The stones do not speak in words, but they speak in form, structure, and presence. The Indus Valley Civilization leaves us with a sense of curiosity and respect. It shows us that progress and order existed long before many assume human societies became advanced. It reminds us that history is not just the story of grand empires and powerful rulers, but also of communities who built thoughtful, balanced ways of living. And perhaps the most meaningful part of their legacy is the mystery that remains. The unanswered questions encourage us to keep learning, searching, and imagining. The silence of their script invites us to continue exploring until one day, we may finally understand the voice of a civilization that once flourished quietly along the river. As we continue to picture this ancient world, imagine the daily rhythm of life in the Indus Valley Civilization. The mornings would begin early. The river breeze would be cool, carrying the faint scent of wet earth. Farmers would step out into the fields at dawn, when the light is soft and the land is calm. They grew crops such as wheat, barley, peas, and cotton. In fact, the people of the Indus Valley are among the earliest known to cultivate cotton. They understood how to spin fibers into thread and weave them into fabric. This means their clothing was not only functional but likely comfortable, suited for the warm climate. In the workshops, artisans began their craft early. The potter turned his wheel, shaping clay with practiced hands. Those who worked with beads heated stones to create precise shapes and drilled tiny holes using tools of remarkable finesse. The weaver sat by a loom of wood and string, passing thread patiently to create cloth that would become garments worn by families day after day. Children likely learned by watching. There were no written schools that we know of, yet skills would be passed naturally from older hands to younger ones. The community itself served as the teacher. The marketplace would slowly become active. Merchants arranged their goods carefully. Not in chaos, but in order. Buyers would come and go, offering weights for measurement. These weights are one of the remarkable signs of standardization. Whether a person was trading in Mohenjo-Daro or in a city miles away, the weights matched. This tells us there was shared agreement and cooperation across a wide region. This was not a single city civilization. It was a network, connected and harmonized. Near the marketplace, the smell of cooked food would drift through the air. Perhaps lentils, grains, and vegetables formed the staples of meals. Clay ovens were used to bake flatbreads. Meals may have been simple, but they were shared, and they were steady. Just as the physical environment shaped daily life, spiritual or symbolic practices must have been present too, though much about them remains unknown. Some houses contain small platforms that may have been shrines. Some figurines might have represented fertility, nature, or community symbols. The repeated image of certain animals on seals, like the humped bull, may have held meaning greater than we understand. We can feel significance, even when the message is quiet. The Great Bath of Mohenjo-Daro stands as one of the most intriguing features of the civilization. It suggests that collective practices were important, perhaps rituals shared by the community. People may have gathered there during special occasions, not just to wash, but to participate in something meaningful together. Water, in many cultures, symbolizes cleansing, renewal, and connection. It is possible that similar ideas existed here. As the day moved forward, the sunlight would shift across the flat rooftops of the houses. Some families might have worked on their roofs, drying grains or letting clothes rest in the warmth. The rooftops provided additional living space, especially in the gentle evenings when the heat settled. Life moved with quiet purpose, not rushed, not wasteful. As night approached, oil lamps made of clay would flicker softly inside homes. The city would become calm again. Conversations, laughter, and rest would return the city to its peaceful rhythm. The river would continue flowing alongside, steady and familiar, as it had for generations. The people of the Indus Valley did not build colossal monuments to be remembered. They built functional, livable cities so that life could continue smoothly for everyone. Their greatness is not in what they proclaimed, but in what they practiced. And so their memory remains, not as a story of conquest, but as a story of balance. As we imagine the final years of the civilization, let us do so gently. People may have packed their belongings, step by step, taking with them traditions, memories, and skills. They may have walked along new riverbanks, settled in new lands, and continued their lives quietly under new names, new languages, new customs. The civilization ended, but the people did not simply vanish. They became part of the long, continuous human story, a story that still flows today. When we look back, we often think of history as a series of rises and falls, beginnings and endings. But the Indus Valley teaches us that history also moves in transitions, slow changes, shifting landscapes, and gradual evolution. Their story does not end with collapse, it continues through transformation. And now, we return to the present moment. We stand here, thousands of years later, reflecting on the stones they placed, the walls they built, the paths they walked. The world has changed in ways they could not have imagined, yet some things remain familiar. Rivers still flow. Communities still gather. Children still learn from elders. People still dream of lives built with peace and purpose. This ancient civilization offers us a quiet reminder that humanity has always had the ability to build with care, to organize with thought, and to live with consideration for one another. As we finish our journey through their world, we do so with respect. The silence of their script may remain for now, but their message does not need words. A meaningful life can be simple. A strong society can be fair. And wisdom does not need to shout to be heard. The bricks of their cities remain. The pattern of their streets remains. The memory of their presence remains. And as long as we continue to learn from them, their story continues, not lost, but alive.